Hey there, it's Melanie from Chasing Fi, and today we're going to talk about the garden. As you know, I live in drought-stricken Utah. And even though I live in the northern part of the state where it's not as desert-like as it is in the southern part of the state where you have all the beautiful red rock, it still is very dry here. And the soil is not good. It's very clay-like. So over the past few years, we have noticed that we are getting less and less precipitation in all forms. And we also are seeing temperature shifts. For example, in 2017, I remember planting on my birthday, which is May 18th. I planted my plants outside. We kind of procrastinated a little bit because we needed to till in a bunch of compost and things like that to help out the soil. So we had waited a little bit longer than we probably should have, because at that time I was planning a little late, because technically I could have planted at the beginning of probably about May 8th. I could have planted right around Mother's Day. So we were planning a little bit late that year. This year we planted May 15th. And I really thought, well, actually, we did lose some plants. I knew we would lose some plants because of the temperatures. Now, we did cover up the plants, but still, like, just the climate is shifting a little bit, not by a ton, but in terms of like when we are planting, we need to shift things a little bit. So while in 2017, planting on May 18th was, you know, well past the date where I could have started planting because the temperatures were fine and we weren't getting the low temps at night. Now I'm thinking that that's just the beginning of when we should start planting, and we probably won't plant our tomatoes until the third week of May, because this is the third year in a row where we have had temperatures dipping below freezing in the second and even the third week of May. During the second week of May, we actually had some snow, and not in the mountains, not just in the mountains, in the valleys. So we will get snow every now and then in May, and sometimes even June in the mountains. It just depends. But usually in the valley, you're pretty clear on the snow after really May 1st, but really after Mother's Day, you just really don't see it. But this year was different. And last year we saw low temps. We just didn't have any precipitation during that time. So needless to say, I was very worried about my garden. And to be honest, after I planted it and we lost like 6 plants, tomatoes, peppers, I thought I was going to lose my squash. I was a little distraught and almost to the point where I was going to say, forget it, like this is ridiculous. I was so upset because I started my seeds and, nurtured the plants and they looked great while they were not in the ground. But then it was, it was getting to the point where the plants, I don't know why, they just did really well this year. They were ready to go into the ground about 3 weeks before we could even consider putting them in the ground. And by the time we put them in the ground, they were root bound and, like some of them were starting to struggle because I didn't want to transplant them again because I'd already transplanted them twice since starting the seeds. I didn't want to transplant them again and then turn around like a week or two later and put them in the ground. So this was very tricky. Like, things have changed. I need to alter when I'm starting seeds if I'm going to start them. And I also need to alter when we plan on getting them in the ground. So this brings me to one conclusion. Like, we ended up going to a local nursery that has good organic veggies and fruits and plants just in general. And we ended up supplementing. We bought several pepper plants and tomato plants because really I didn't think any of my peppers were going to make it. It looks like one of the seeds that I started will make it, but the other one just didn't make it. I started off with 6 peppers and ended up with 1. So we went to this nursery in town and bought some more peppers and they look phenomenal. We also only spent $12 and we got a substantial amount of plants, tomatoes and peppers. And we bought some potatoes too. So at this point, will I be starting seeds next year? Maybe, but not as many because I hate the fact that I'm putting all this effort in to keep the seedlings healthy and then they look great, but then they can't go in the ground for a while and then it's really becoming touch and go with the nighttime temperatures. So, like you can see, besides the plants here, we had these covers. We had to put bricks on top of them because the wind has been crazy and it's cold. I mean, it's just to this point, I just feel like maybe we might just be buying our plants. We just find a nice organic nursery like we have in town and we go pick up plants. I don't know. The jury's still out. I'll probably start something. I do like starting my own seeds and I've harvested them, so I want to be able to use them, but I just don't know. Things are changing here in Utah. A few of the things that we're doing to maintain our garden this year, we've decided that we're going to hand water. Now, usually what we have, you can see the PVC there. We usually set up a watering system and we water twice a day for 30 minutes. But technically, you really don't need that for every plant. So for example, peppers, you don't necessarily need to water peppers every day, let alone twice a day. So we're just not doing that this year. Tomatoes, when it's hot, we need to be watering them twice a day, but I work from home and I really need to be out there anyway in the garden, weeding and everything. So we're just going to water by hand. That way we can get the water right on the plant and we're not, watering all this dry dirt here and growing a bunch of weeds. So that's one of our plans to help sustain our garden. The other thing, which I think is really brilliant, my husband has decided that we are going to, instead of trying to maintain a front lawn, because, we don't want to waste water on things that don't matter, like grass. We're not going to be eating the grass and it's just a waste. We are going to put wood chips on our front yard as a type of xeriscaping, make it look nice and everything. But then every few years, we will be able to take the wood chips as they break down and move them back to the garden as compost. And we'll just keep filling up the wood chips every few years. And then eventually we'll probably come up with some other solution that we want to xeriscape with. But I think that that's a good way to go, especially this year, because we want to help conserve water and we want to use water on things that matter. The great news that I have is that over Memorial Day weekend, we got a ton of rain. It literally started raining Saturday night and just off and on all day Sunday and all day Monday, rain. It was great. And while it was raining in the valleys, so it was cooler, but not so cool that it was going, we didn't have any hard freezes or anything like that. So our plants are fine. But it rained and really just soaked into the ground, and the compost is really doing a great job out there in our garden because you can see it's like holding in that moisture, whereas usually when it rains here, like the ground is usually dry pretty fast after it stops raining. So that's really good to see. Our compost is working well. So now we don't have to water for a few days. This was real rain, like puddles and things like that, which is kind of unheard of here. So it was really nice to have that going on. It was a little cooler, but it has since warmed up, which is good. And like I said, no hard freezes. So whatever, we'll take it. If we can get the rain and the snow in the mountains, we're happy about that. So at this point, we're looking at different ways to sustain our garden. This year, we're going to go with the hand watering, see if that makes a difference. We also are probably going to do some raised garden beds in the future, maybe some grow bags. We're just going to try different things because as the climate shifts, we're going to have to make changes over time. We're going to use a greenhouse possibly in the fall so that we can continue to grow our greens year round. Because it really doesn't get that cold here. We probably could just plant the kale in the in the ground and it wouldn't matter. But we're going to use a greenhouse so that we can plant other things too. The kale could make it on its own, but we'll probably have some other plants out there as well. So those are some of our plants for our garden. I am so excited that it looks like, as you can see, the plants look much better. We actually decided to plant some hot type peppers, so I'm super excited about that. The majority of our garden this year, peppers, tomatoes, squash, we're not growing as much as we usually do. partially because we're trying to really pay attention to when we should be planting things. For some reason, a lot of the seeds that I have are like plants that should be planted in the fall. And I usually just plant them all in May, and there's no reason to do that. So, like later on, we're going to possibly plant like Brussels sprouts and things like that. And it will be good because when you plant them during the season that they're supposed to be planted, you might be able to avoid some of the aphids. Like last time we planted Brussels sprouts, we we had a serious aphid infestation. It was so terrible. So we're going to try and really pay attention to how much water does this plant need individually? When should it be planted? When does it grow the best? Things like that. We are really going to try to pay attention to that stuff. In terms of our trees, I don't know. The peach tree may not produce anything this year. As you can see, we've really cut it down. It's old, and we probably need to just plant another one because we probably won't have this one for much longer. And we had really cold temps late after the blossoms came on, so we may not get any peaches on here. We have a neighbor who they don't use the peaches, so we usually get really good peaches from them, so hopefully their trees are okay. We have produces a lot of fruit, so we definitely need to plan for that this year. The plum tree, we pruned that back, so we usually get some productivity out of it. We shall see. But for this year, we're easing into some of the changes, and we're really paying attention to what's going on. I'm keeping a little journal. Like, for example, I always say I'm going to do this, but I actually did it this year. I kind of wrote down how things were going those first few weeks of, the plants were in the ground, and I've adjusted the time. If I do plan on starting seeds, I will start the peppers earlier because they're just so little, like they just take so long to get big. I will plant the peppers earlier inside and then plant the tomatoes later than I usually do because they are getting really big in that like 3 week window that seems to be kind of a shift from when we would plant them. We seem to have to wait 3 more weeks to plant them. And the peppers, they just don't get very big. So I can plant those. I can start those seeds probably end of December. Sounds crazy, but that's when I'm going to start them. And I think that over time we'll be able to sustain our garden here, at least for a while. Just depends on how fast things change. But I can say, as someone who has been growing food for the past 6 years, that let's say 5 years, things have changed in that 5 year time. That's not a long time. It's not like I'm some, several decade farmer, but I can tell you for sure that things are changing here in Utah in terms of our growing seasons. So, you can take it for what it is. How about you? Are you growing a garden? Have you noticed any shifts in the climate or temperatures or when you can plant or whatever? Let me know in the comments because I'm really curious about this because eventually we may move somewhere else. And I really want to be in a place where we can grow as much of our own food as possible. So, like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.